Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Sandy. We're live around the clock to keep you ahead of this dangerous storm.
And we want to take you now to Dave Malkoff, who has been looking at various things. And Dave, you know, I was just reading a study that potentially 10 million people could be affected with power outages.
Yeah, even more than last year. A lot of crews are getting set for that. Now is the time to get ready for the arrival of Sandy. And officials across the Northeast are actually getting their emergency plans into motion. Let's take a look. New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg ordered the mandatory evacuation of low-lying coastal areas, including Coney Island, the Rockaways, Brighton Beach, Red Hook, and some parts of lower Manhattan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced the suspension of all MTA service. That means Long Island Railroad, the Metro North. That all begins at 7 o'clock tonight. Now, New York City schools will be closed on Monday. That's all New York City schools. If you want more about school closures, I posted that on Twitter. It's at Malkoff. We also have it on our website, weather.com, underneath the state-by-state index. Now, let's go further up the coast to Connecticut, where Governor Dan Malloy spoke about his state and how they're getting ready for the real possibility of power outages. There were about 2,800 line workers in Connecticut after Hurricane Irene. That was last year. They hope to bring in even more for Sandy from the Midwest, from the Southeast, even as far away as San Diego.
Typically, the crews bring their own equipment. They drive their own trucks, bring their equipment with them, because we don't have excess equipment just sitting around. We have some, but not enough to supply all these. So the way the mutual assistance works is people bring their own trucks, they bring their own supplies as much as we can. We make sure we house them, feed them, and provide safety training for them, but they bring their own equipment.
Yeah, help is on the way. They hope to have a crew in every single town starting to restore service as fast as they can, but they can't do that until the winds die down. It's too dangerous to have those trucks with the masts in the air, so that could mean that people would be without power for up to a few days. Back to you, Heather and Viv.
All right, thanks very much, Dave. I'll tell you what, this could be a huge, huge impact over the Northeast. That's why we cannot stress enough that you need to get ready right now to be without power for days.
And, you know, really you need to prepare for two scenarios depending on where you live, because, you know, you need to prepare to have your kit in case you're without power at home, but also if you have to evacuate, you need things you can grab and go. So do all of this today. We're going to send it over now to our hurricane specialist, Carl Parker, taking a look at everything. And Carl, really, this is something where people need to really think about the steps they need to take today before this all comes in.
Now is the time to do it. It really is, because tomorrow is going to be too late. The wind will be coming in. It's got this absolutely enormous area of strong wind, and you can really see that when we look at this high-resolution visible satellite imagery, and this is what's called rapid scan imagery. These pictures taken every minute. And look at this now. Notice the coastline up there. There's New Jersey. There's the Delmarva. There's North Carolina. Look at the size of the area that is spinning, and from southwest to northeast, the area of tropical storm force winds is almost 900 miles long. It would take you 2.5 hours on a commercial airliner to fly from one end of this storm to the other. So a massive storm, and that's a big part of why the duration of this event is going to make such a difference here in terms of the trees that come down, the power lines that come down. And in fact, I want to show you how this is going to play out. So here is a model depiction of the winds coming in, and tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., winds starting to gust to hurricane force. We think in Boston and also in New York City. That is going to continue through the middle of the day, right into the afternoon. We're starting to see those hurricane force gusts in the D.C. area, Baltimore, and down into Tidewater, Virginia. Then through the afternoon into the evening, winds finally begin to relent somewhat, but they're still very, very strong, we think, up and down the 95 corridor. And that's why we think that a lot of these tree branches and power lines will fail because of this relentless pounding of wind, and it's still going there even into Tuesday afternoon. And of course, the other thing we've been talking about, this wind is going to be piling up the water at the coast. That could have enormous impacts in New York City. We want to go now to Jim Cantore. He's been stationed at the Battery, and Jim, already we're seeing a lot of signs of this massive surge along the coast.
That we are. From Florida all the way up to Sandy Hook, New Jersey. Water is already higher than it normally would be because of the astronomical high tide. And Carl, before I let you go, When is the last time that you've seen something this large in terms of, you know, the water that's expected as well as the wind on the East Coast and what's going to be happening over the entire section of the Great Lakes?
Yeah, you know, I was looking at the map this morning, the 850 winds covering the eastern third of the country. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this, to be honest with you, Jim, and I imagine you probably haven't either.
No, I haven't, and that's why we're in uncharted territories, and that's why we were concerned about yesterday in terms of how high the water was going to get here, you know, in New York Harbor and Long Island Sound, and any of these areas, the East River. You really had to take that into consideration, and that was very worrisome to us meteorologists. But it was a breath of fresh air to hear this from Mayor Michael Bloomberg this morning.
In light of these conditions, I'm going to sign an executive order mandating evacuation of Zone A areas.
All right, so you're talking now 375,000 people that have till 7 o'clock tonight. Unfortunately, a much shorter time than we would have liked to get out of harm's way. 6 to 11 foot storm surge is what we're expecting here. 6 to 11 feet. Irene was 5.5, so already expecting over that as a minimum storm surge in through here. And of course, Long Island, South Shore Long Island is going to get absolutely hammered without a doubt in terms of the wave action. Ladies, we'll keep you posted here from Battery Park, where we are in Zone A, and we are going to be evacuated, unfortunately, and we have to leave our hotel as well. So we're one of the thousands that will have to leave this area. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Jim. We will be right back.
Stay tuned.
To operate the trains in high winds. Second, we don't want the equipment damaged, and trains are designed to deal with a lot of tough duty. They are not intended to be submerged.
And right there, Mystic Seaport, Connecticut, you can see the view here, and this is someone who is out looking live at the scene. And, you know, as you look to these structures, it could be an extremely different view as we go into the next 24 to 48 hours, Vivian.
And the next 24 hours will be very critical over the Northeast. Here is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. By the way, we get official advisories every 3 hours, and as the system gets a little closer, perhaps even more consistent than that, 3 hours. You can see winds of 75 miles an hour, but we're not really concerned about the winds of this being a Category 1 hurricane. We're more interested in the overall magnitude of this system and the overall pressure gradient, or the strong winds that will be so expansive across the Northeast for such a long period of time, and that we think will lead to widespread power outages over the region. It's moving to the Northeast at about 14 miles an hour. Here is the center of a Sandy, by the way, right here. Again, you can see it's a good ways away from the coast, and certainly even farther away from the New York City area. I was looking at the latest extrapolation, and actually it's over 500 miles away from the New York City area. But that is the center of the storm, of course. We're talking about the tropical storm force winds already at this time spanning out over 400 miles away from the center. We're already getting tropical storm force winds along the coast here of North Carolina and Virginia, and just battering the waves. Very heavy rain for the coastal areas. Our very own Julie Martin is there at Nags Head, and she's really getting battered right now. And again, you can see how far it is away from the coast. Now, this is where we think Sandy is going. We think it'll continue to the northeast for the short term, but then eventually take a turn to the left, and that will make it right inland here, or a direct path near the New York City area. Now, we're thinking sometime between Monday evening and Tuesday morning is when the center of the storm will come on shore. But again, long before then, we'll start to feel the impacts from Sandy, as those winds are already very, very expansive. Now, here are some of the biggest impacts that we think we'll find in the New York City area and the entire Northeast. Flooding, rains, and wind damage, because we're talking about winds up to 60 and 70 miles an hour for days. So that could really create huge problems. So please be prepared right now to be without electricity, perhaps for days starting tomorrow. Heather?
All right, thank you so much, Vivian. And we also want to talk about some of these places where we are not only seeing rain, but other places that we're going to be seeing some snow from this very complex system. First of all, certainly it's those areas along the coast that we will be looking at the rainfall. But, as we look here at some of the threat conditions we'll be finding, I wanted to point out that in addition to that flooding, rain, and the wind damage, which is going to be so widespread, folks, you are going to see those widespread power outages. Some estimates are that 10 million customers could be without power. That's customers. So each customer might have 4 people that live in that family or home. And then, of course, we'll also be monitoring the inland flooding. So we have that going on, but also this is a very complex system. And what you'll note is that as it continues to work its way up the coast, it also is going to be, merging here. And it is going to merge in with this really deepening low pressure system. And while you see the wet conditions along the coast, we've got that very cold air that is in place behind this. And that is going to mean that some of these mountainous areas will actually be picking up some snowfall. And that's where things are going to get very interesting. This is how we go through Monday. And you note here the regions that are picking up some of that snowfall. It's going to be in the higher elevations, but in some of these areas, you'll notice it's even 2,000 feet that you'll be looking at snow and potentially feet of snow for some of you. Very cold with that, very windy conditions. So Vivian, there's so many aspects to this storm system. It really makes it fascinating, but at the same time very dangerous.
And of course, you've tuned to the Weather Channel to keep you updated on all of the impacts and the aspects of tropical cyclone, this Hurricane Sandy. So keep it tuned right here. We have a full tropical update that's coming up with...
I'm going to sign an executive order mandating evacuation of Zone A areas.
You are watching the Weather Channel, and we're so happy that you joined us because we have the very latest information on Hurricane Sandy. And if you know someone in the Northeast that may not be watching the Weather Channel or may not have any idea about Sandy, then please call them and let them know.
And I think a lot of times people think things are overhyped. Yeah. So we just want to let all of you know that this is a storm you need to take very seriously. And I know with more reasons why, we're going to turn it over now to our hurricane specialist, Carl Parker. And I believe you're joined now by our other specialist, Brian Norcross. And, this is one where folks really do need to believe how bad it's going to get.
Yeah, and regarding that question about it being overhyped, I wonder if you've ever seen a storm like this.
No. Yeah. No, not one that we think is going to affect so many people for such an extended period of time. I mean, even really bad hurricanes, like really bad, like Hurricane Andrew bad hurricanes, they come and they go. We talked about this during Isaac. It took a long time, but it wasn't a really bad hurricane. Right. I mean, it was terrible for people that were affected, but in the overall scheme of things, right? But this is not only massive, but is going to affect so many people, but the effects are going to be extreme. I think we're going to see effects that in some places on the East Coast that we have not seen from any storm.
And really large storms pile up the water much more so than small ones do. And so we're talking about water level rises that are going to be unlike anything we've seen in recent memory.
And waves, huge waves on top of that, because the pressure of the storm has to do with the amount of energy that's in the water. Right. And as I know you've talked about, that circulation pressure at 951 now, that's getting down near record low pressures for the East Coast of the United States, right? So that is talking about the energy in that whole circulation, and then that's pushing the water, and that's why evacuations have been ordered up and down the coast, including now in part of New York City.
Yeah, we want to talk about that right now and take a look at some of these areas where the evacuations are in place. So what you're seeing here, let's go over to what you're seeing right here. These are the zones, the New York City evacuation zones, and in red, that is Zone A. That is the area where people have been asked to evacuate now in New York City.
Right, so here's what's happening. This is the tip of Manhattan here. that we're looking at. Now, the water is going to come from actually two directions. It's going to come from the south, that's coming in New York Harbor. It comes in New York Bay, Raritan Bay, and then gets pushed up from the south. So here's the Hudson River, here's the East River. But the other thing is it's going to come down the East River from Long Island Sound. So you have both of those effects going on, and that is what causes this flooding.
You've got a confluence going on there.
That's right. So this is Brooklyn over here now. This is called Newtown Creek up there. This is Newtown Creek. This is the Gowanus Canal down here. So the Gowanus Expressway, people know. So all along this waterfront where the ports are in Brooklyn, and then Battery Park and Battery Park City on the west side. This is not just to the West Side Highway now. This is a block in from the West Side Highway is evacuated. On the east side, all along the FDR Drive there, and just west of the FDR Drive, you're talking about evacuation orders. Now, good news is, relative to New York, a lot of people don't live in these coastal immediately on the water in Manhattan, right? But that's not true down here in Coney Island, over here in Manhattan Beach. This is Manhattan Beach right there. These are the Rockaways down here. That whole area is subject to going underwater in a storm like this, with this massive push of water coming in this way, and then it gets trapped, has nowhere to go. And then you go over to Staten Island here on the left side, and here you see that even up on Arthur Kill up in here. This waterway is called Arthur Kill, and this kill going down here, the old Dutch word kill for waterway. This is very low in here, and this is very low over here. Now, most people on Staten Island live on the higher ground, but still, right along those people that are near the water, they need to get away from that, because that water is going to be very, very high.
And the rain could be coming down very heavily, too, and that could also worsen the situation.
That'll worsen the situation because the water will try and come out of the base. Let's go up to the north really quickly, because I want to just point this out. We don't have a lot of evacuations up there. This is City Island here, and this is the Harlem River, and you know there's a couple of reds there, but that's because the water is going to get piled in Long Island Sound. This is Long Island Sound. LaGuardia Airport is back over here to the west. All of that is going to be subject to flooding as well along those shores, on the north shore of Long Island and on the south shore of Connecticut, and then that water gets forced here into the East River and up and then the Harlem River is affected as well. So it's water coming on both sides of New York that is causing this evacuation issue.
All right, major surge flooding possible there in the New York City area, and we're going to talk much more about this coming up in just a moment as our coverage continues.
And we continue here to track Sandy, and hopefully you now are using your time as we await the arrival. This potentially historic storm is battering parts of the East Coast. It is kicking up the surf, whipping up the winds, and dumping lots of rain. But we've got the worst yet to come.
And at this time, you should be using to prepare for Sandy's arrival in the Northeast. The word from our experts at this hour that this is the last day to do so, because tomorrow this system could be right at your front door. Everything you need to know to stay safe during Hurricane Sandy is right here on Weekend Now.
And you are watching special coverage now from Weekend Now. We are tracking Sandy. Vivian Brown along with Heather Tesh. And, you know, we talked about preparing gas up your vehicles. You need cash. And think about your pets, too.
Oh, absolutely. You need to do everything that you need to do personally now for all of your personal items, because you very well could be without electricity for days to come. And conditions are winding down now. Time is winding down, should I say, for deteriorating conditions. We have team coverage, of course, from the Atlanta studios here at the Weather Channel, but also our teams out in the field.
And, you know, they really are fanned out throughout the East Coast. Jim Cantori in Battery Park City, New York. Reynolds Wolf is in Mystic, Connecticut. And we're going to hear from these folks throughout the hour. But we do want to give you the latest on the evacuation orders.
Yeah, we have the orders now in effect for Zone A in New York City. That includes about 370,000 people. Officials shut down the entire New York mass transit system at 7 o'clock tonight. In addition to that, now, the New York City public schools will be closed tomorrow.
And according to flight tracker company FlightAware.com, more than 3,200 flights have already been canceled. We also are seeing delays in Newark and New York City. Amtrak, you also are going to find that they are canceling services today, and you can expect a lot more of this.
Well, as we've been mentioning, Heather, over the entire Northeast, some 50 million people will be impacted. So we've kind of highlighted in the red here where you should take action, and that means what we've said earlier, to get everything that you need personally to sustain yourself, if you will. If you do not have any power, you need to get non-perishable foods, and that is, of course, foods that does not need to be heated or does not need to be cooled, for that matter.
And hopefully you have a can opener that's not electric.
Absolutely.
And, you know, when you see how widespread this is, too, for some of you that live in areas that potentially could flood, you really need to have 2 kits, emergency kits. One is just everything you'll need at home to sustain yourself for, say, 3 days or more without power. But also, Vivian, you know, some of these folks may have to evacuate, and because of that, they need to have a kit ready to go and know what you're going to do with medications, your pet, and everything that you need to think of.
And that evacuation order has just been issued from earlier today from the governor of New York, saying that, hey, you need to get out of Zone A by 7 o'clock tonight. Let's bring in our hurricane specialist, Carl Parker, who's in our Global Forecast Center with the very latest, of course, on this potentially devastating storm. Carl.
Yeah, guys, there are a couple of things that we really want people to do. One is, first of all, to prepare today, because tomorrow will be too late in the Northeast. And the other is not to use your past experience as a frame of reference for this storm. So, for example, if you've been through a Category 1 hurricane, you thought it wasn't that bad, this is not an average Category 1 storm. This is something far different. It's an entirely different animal. It's enormous, and it's going to be a long-lasting system. And here's something that really illustrates that point. I want to show you a satellite picture. This is from the University of Wisconsin, and this is a visible high-resolution imagery that's taken every minute, and you can see the incredible expanse of this circulation. Here's the coastline, there's New Jersey, there's Delmarva, there's North Carolina. So from one end of the storm to the other, from southwest to northeast, if you were to get in a commercial airliner and try to fly that distance, it would take you 2.5 hours. That is nearly 900 miles from one end to the other. So a remarkably large storm, and that will magnify the impacts of this storm. And we'll take a look here at the wind forecast. You notice the winds at 30 to 50 miles per hour early tomorrow morning in a lot of our major metros. Then we're seeing winds gusting to 75 in Boston and New York City by 8 a.m. tomorrow potentially, and then that'll be the case in D.C. and Norfolk 1 p.m. and that will continue through the day tomorrow. Again, a long-lived storm. And because of that very large area of wind that's piling up the water, we're really concerned about what's going to happen in downtown New York. And let's go to Jim Cantore now for the very latest on that.
Yeah,
hey, Jim.
I wanted to do a handheld. Yeah, sorry, Carl. We're just kind of coordinating things out and through here. Yeah, I can't. Seriously, I cannot believe the size of this thing. It's absolutely off the charts, and unfortunately, that means it's just pushing all this water. I just had a gentleman come up to me and tell me. Now, I can't verify this, but this is the story that he told me, and this is what I'm worried about in the immediate future. There's a Norwegian cruise line that apparently is supposed to leave port here to sail toward Bermuda at 4 o'clock today, which. It kind of boggles my mind. We know that there are 30-plus foot waves out there. We know already Bermuda's under tropical storm warning. So if, in fact, that is true, I hope that there's some reconsideration of that. We're waiting to hear from the president. He will be at FEMA headquarters. We expect him to make a statement, obviously, on the severity of this storm and how I'm sure he wants people to heed all the warnings, which there are many. And by the way, we have seen something up here I've never seen. We're actually under a hurricane force wind warning. So we're not under a hurricane warning, but we're under a hurricane force wind warning through 3 o'clock on Tuesday, which is, I guess, kind of a pseudo-hurricane warning. Either way, we're expecting gusts 70 to 80 knots here, and that certainly means problems. And you can see why, Frankie, just pan up to these trees. These are ginkgo trees, and you can see they're fully leafed here. There are many trees still in and around the city that have a leaf canopy like that. So, you know, we have that in Pennsylvania, we have it in New Jersey, and we have it across southern New York, and, of course, even parts of southern New England. So, lots to cover here, guys. A large, large storm.
New video just into our satellite center here at the Weather Channel. People boarding up homes and buying supplies in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, rightfully so, because conditions are on the way deteriorating as we're watching Hurricane Sandy off to the south. So are conditions deteriorating in the New York City area. You can see the clouds are starting to fill in. We've also gotten reports that the winds are increasing. Temperatures right now now in the middle 50s, but it's kind of the calm before the storm. And the storm we're talking about is Hurricane Sandy. Now, this is a look at our latest radar. A lot of this not reaching the ground right now, showing some returns near the Long Island area here in western New York City, just west of the downtown Manhattan area. But the winds now, these are true verifications. Winds out of the northeast gusting up to 20 miles an hour at times. Well, actually, these larger numbers are the sustained winds, but we have gusts over 30 miles an hour at times, even down here now off the coast of New Jersey. So very, very windy already, and this will just deteriorate as we go through the next 48 hours because the center of the storm is well over 500 miles away from the downtown New York City area, about 300 miles off the coast here of the mid-Atlantic, but already the winds and the very heavy rain coming into the coastal areas of North Carolina. But here's a look at the timing for downtown New York City. 18 to 19 million people impacted now. Tomorrow we're talking about the winds over 60 miles an hour with significant water rise now along the coast. And then Monday night those winds could increase to 70 miles an hour. And Tuesday still dealing with those 60 to 70 mile an hour winds. So this will be a long duration event, and that's why we want you to prepare right now for this huge storm. Heather?
All right, thank you so much. And we want to go now to North Carolina. Julie Martin is in Nags Head. And, you know, Julie, we have been monitoring so many areas, but as people watch from home, while you have it bad where you're at, that they're going to think this is what we'll see in the Northeast, and it's actually going to be a lot worse.
It is. This is just sort of a small preview of a mild version of what they're going to see, and it is no fun. Blinding, stinging rain. We have tropical storm force winds for a long period of time. We've been in tropical storm force winds since midnight, and they're not going anywhere. We're still going to be seeing those gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour throughout the day in through this evening as well. And take a look out here in the Atlantic. We're at low tide right now. This old pier is still holding up all right, but take a look at the wave action. It is just taking a beating out there. In fact, the shingles from this restaurant, I believe it is, have been flying off all day. Now, the beach is holding up pretty well. It has been refurbished. It's doing its job. I understand that we now have President Obama at FEMA headquarters, and we want to listen in to what he has to say about Sandy.
Our forecasters, and I know that all of you have been in contact with the state and local officials, making sure that preparedness is in place. Our sense is that this is going to obviously affect a big swath of the country, and because it's slow moving, it could be a matter of days before, in some cases, folks are able to get in to restore power and so forth. So the main thing I just wanted to do is to, A, give you encouragement, given that this is going to be a lot of work over the next week, but also I just want to get some details in terms of how we're doing, what the current forecasts are, what potential holes you see in our preparation, and then I know that we're going to have an opportunity to talk to the governors to make sure that they feel as if they've got every bit of support that they need from us. So with that, Craig, please go ahead.
All right, everybody, as we've been talking about for the last couple of days, this will not be a point on the map, and the landfall of this storm is not going to be the primary area. We're going to have a lot of impacts starting with storm surge. So again, think big, go fast, be smart about it. We're not going to have enough detail to say this is the only area of impact, and we won't be able to say that this is the only area hit because this is going to take several days. So load everything up, make sure we're there. Right now, the focus will be on support and evacuation. Mr. President, just a real quick lay down of what FEMA's got, and this is, again, when I say FEMA, it's really what the federal team has. We've gone ahead and started moving resources. We have the Army Corps of Engineers with the power restoration teams moving in. We have generators moving in, Coast Guard's working port issues as it's becoming evident that there will be increased impacts to transportation. They are working with those captains of the ports about what will happen there. The FAA and others will brief out on what transportation looks like as that begins to get impacted. But we have moved supplies and teams and are pre-deployed into these areas, not necessarily fixating on a particular state as much as what the areas of impact will be. And as Rick Knapp's going to brief, we're dealing with storm surge first,
large area of strong winds across the Northeast, heavy rain across the Northeast, and what you normally don't deal with hurricanes is a area of winter weather coming into West Virginia, heavy snowfall. So we're preparing for the consequences of the evacuation first, then the impacts of that flooding, as well as inland flooding, as well as widespread and extensive power outages. So that, Mr. President, I'll turn it back over to Russ to bring up the Hurricane Center.
Thanks, sir. Next, we'll go to Director Nab, the National Hurricane Center.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Administrator Fugate. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's update you.
And of course, we were just finishing up there. I'm hearing from Dr. Rick Nab, who worked with us, and now, of course, in charge of the Hurricane Center. But, you know, I think so many people are taking this, the government officials, seriously, because the storm is going to make history. This is not something that might, it will.
And that is what the director of FEMA said. He said, think big, react big, and prepare big, because this is a huge storm. We're talking about days without power, starting tomorrow with conditions going downhill all across the Northeast.
Well, you know, the size, the threat, the impacts, all of these are going to be immense. And, of course, President Obama also speaking, saying that he is going to lend a hand, any kind of support they need, he's going to give to them.
All right, so we want you to keep it tuned right here to the Weather Channel for the latest. We have a team of meteorologists here in the studio. They're fanned out along the Northeast coast, including in the Mystic, Connecticut area, right along the coast there, not far from the Long Island Sound. And that's where we find our own Reynolds Wolf with this live report. Reynolds.
You know, guys, for 400 years in this area, in Mystic, you've got 400 years of maritime history where they've been dealing with all kinds of things, from tropical storms to hurricanes to nor'easters. They've dealt with all kinds of flooding. To be more recent, we've had, of course, Irene, that brought in about a foot's worth of flooding that came right over these gunwales and then right across the roadways and then flooded some of the buildings you see behind me. But with this, with the high tide, the full moon, and also the strong winds that we anticipate, flooding is going to be all but a certainty, and we expect it to be up to 4 feet. Now, to prepare for that is certainly a busy time, and one person who's had a very busy morning is Steve White of Mystic Harbor. Steve, I know you're very busy. I thank you so much for taking time for us. What kind of preparations have you had this morning to prepare for this event?
Well, it's been a busy one here at Mystic Seaport. For our first priority is taking care of about 40 of our floating vessels, 4 of which are National Historic Landmark vessels, so we've really got to be sure they're protected and out of harm's way. Secondly, we've got to be sure everything that's can float is moved to higher ground. And then our third concern is, of course, water infiltration into all of our buildings here in a 17-acre campus. So it's a lot to take care of, a lot of objects to remove, and we're just hoping the water won't rise as high as it might.
Now, Steve, all things considered, with Irene, you were pretty lucky for the most part, weren't you?
We really were. We were pretty much flooded, but no water infiltration, no loss of any objects or damage to vessels. So we were pretty lucky. We're hoping for it again.
Absolutely. In terms of the wind and potential power outages, anything you can do to safeguard against that?
Well, you know, we've got generators ready to go, and buildings that need power will have it, but just keep our fingers crossed.
Folks, he's one of the hardest working guys you're going to find. I know it's going to be busy times for you. Good luck to you.
Thanks. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And, you know, one big issue that we have, you can see right behind me, not exactly say the ships, but look at the hillside, just covered still with that beautiful fall foliage. The big issue that you have is with all those leaves on those trees, that creates a great deal of air resistance, so when the wind comes through, and it's going to be really strong at times, sustained for hours and hours, we're talking gusts approaching 70 miles an hour, tree damage is all but a certainty. With those down branches, you have the potential for the power outages that we were talking about, and that's a problem that may be not just a couple of days, but possibly for a few weeks for millions of people that call this region home. Let's send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you so much. Reynolds Wolf in Mystic, Connecticut. You know, they did mention generators. If you are using one, keep in mind, too, the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning. Do not have the generator in your garage or in your home. It has to be outside.
That could be very, very dangerous. But keep it tuned to the Weather Channel. In fact, you can go to weather.com and get a list of items that you need just in case you are without power. And we do think that that is a big chance that you'll be without power, because this system is so strong, so immense.
And some estimates are that 10 million of you will be without power. You know, something that you potentially can do too today as you're preparing is videotape or take pictures of the items around your house if there's a potential that you are prone to flooding, and you really need to be aware if your area is in a zone that could flood.
Yeah, and speaking of zones, of course, Zone A has been evacuated from earlier this morning.
Right, in New York City.
In the New York City area, yeah, and that includes the downtown Manhattan area. So be mindful of that. And at the airports, we have delays because deteriorating conditions expected, and I think that this just may be the beginning of delays, if you will, if not cancellations later on. You can see that going into and out of the major hubs in New York, including LaGuardia, the John F. Kennedy, and in Newark now, we're already having some problems, and the weather conditions are not nearly as bad as what we're expecting, say, 24 hours from now. So just bear that in mind, and we're taking you down now to Philadelphia. We have delays there, over a 2-hour delay being reported, and the reason, the weather, of course, as we watch Sandy loom offshore.
So we're going to see a lot of closures here with airports in this region. Also, millions could lose power over the next several days, and utility companies, they're already bringing in emergency resources, and they're helping with the aftermath.
So joining us on the phone is Carl Nedamine. I know, Carl, I spoke with you yesterday. I messed up your name yesterday. But today, tell us more about what you're doing in terms of the power outages, because you're over the Dominion, Virginia area?
Yes, we're Dominion Virginia Power and Dominion North Carolina Power. And we prepared carefully and thoroughly over the past many days for the arrival of this powerful storm and the potentially widespread power outages that we knew it was going to bring. So far, we've had about 20,000 customers affected by power outages at one point or another as the storm has begun to arrive. We've been able to keep up very easily with that level of outages and now have about 2,800 customers without power. And as you can imagine, it's predominantly in the southeastern area of Virginia. We have our crews out there doing the work as it occurs. We have additional crews from utilities arriving to supplement our workforce. The crews are going to be working from sunup to sundown as conditions permit. We can't let them out there if there's a chance that they're going to get hurt, because we want to make sure that we keep our crews and the public safe. But we're battened down, we're ready to go, and we're hoping that the public will be able to get through this as easily as possible.
Well, you know, typically when there's a situation where we may lose power, we tell folks, you know, prepare to have the items you need for about 3 days. But is this situation different than that?
Well, this is going to be a major storm, as everyone knows very well by now. We're expecting the restoration to take several days once it begins, and the storm's passage through the area is probably going to take several days. So we're looking at a multi-day restoration effort. As always, we're urging people to plan ahead. It's kind of late for that right now. Any last-minute steps you can take, please do. And when our workers are out there doing their jobs, if you see a crew along the side of the road doing some work, if you're driving, if you can, please pull over one lane away from them or slow down a little bit the same way you would as an emergency vehicle. Give them a little room. Let them have a little more safety as they work to get your lights back on.
Sort of the mid-Atlantic area. So at this point, the constituents in your area, what do you recommend them to do? Do you recommend them to just stay hunkered down right now, or do you think that they should try to get out and move farther inland or away from the coast?
We would leave that recommendation to the governor and to the elected officials who really know the best way to keep the public safe. We'd like to suggest, if you're at home, if you see a power line come down or if you see any utility line coming down, stay away from it, stay away from anything it's touching, and report it. Either call your local utility or call 911, but stay away from any down power line, please.
All right, thank you so much, again, Carl Nedamine. And, you know, good advice, too, is, write down some of these numbers today that you may need in the days to come. Find out your utility number and whether you should call 911 in cases of just finding out more information, too, about the zones and things. It's 311 in many cases, so just be aware of all the various places you need to go in the Internet to find out information.
Yeah, both you and I have been here at the Weather Channel for at least a decade, and we're talking about never really seeing anything of this magnitude.
Well, and there are people that have been here even longer that say this is unprecedented. This is going to be a historic storm. It is going to be.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Sandy. We're live around the clock to keep you ahead of this massive storm.
And you know, it is going to be massive. We're talking size, threat, and the expected impacts to really be of historic significance to this area. And we want to give more, too, on what we are going to be finding from Dave Malkoff, and he is live in the Satellite Center.
You know, Viv and Heather, the warnings for the Northeast could not be worded any stronger. The impact of Sandy could potentially be epic. We're talking about conditions that have never been seen in this region for more than 70 years. With an expected landfall more than a day away still, officials are starting to move ahead with their emergency plans. So let's take a look at those. New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg ordered a mandatory evacuation of parts of Lower Manhattan and other low-lying neighborhoods. Right now, 72 shelters around the city are open and pets are welcome there. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, Governor Chris Christie authorized the closure of all state offices on Monday due to the impending impact of Hurricane Sandy. Let's go to New Jersey, where transit authorities say they will start an implemental system-wide shutdown that starts in just a few hours at 4 p.m. You know, just a few minutes ago, FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate briefed the president on the plans to respond to Hurricane Sandy. We are getting those pictures from Washington in just a little bit. We don't have the pictures yet, but we do have an audio recording of that, so let's take a listen to that.
Our sense is that this is going to obviously affect a big swath of the country, and because it's slow moving, it could be a matter of days before, in some cases, folks are able to get in to restore power and so forth. So the main thing I just wanted to do is to, A, give you encouragement, given that this is going to be a lot of work over the next week. But also, I just want to get some details in terms of how we're doing, what the current forecasts are, what potential holes you see in our preparation. And then I know that we're going to have an opportunity to talk to the governors to make sure that they feel as if they've got every bit of support that they need from us.
And Mr. Obama was really there to ask questions of FEMA. He asked them, how far are these winds going to push inland in the United States? They told him they could go as far as Ohio and cause some snowfall, even in West Virginia. However, the New York Stock Exchange is back to normal. They have normal operations on Monday. According to the exchange, weather last time at the NYSE will shut down on March 27th, 1985. That was the last time it shut down. That was the last time that weather shut down the NYSE was in 1985. So they haven't shut down since then. Back to you guys.
That was because of Hurricane Gloria. Thanks very much, Dave. Well, for more in-depth analysis, let's go to our Global Forecast Center.
And, Carla, you know, as we look to tomorrow now, we're talking about areas like Boston and also into New York and New Jersey with these winds, you know, gusting to 60. Some places like New York, over 70 potentially.
Yeah, it's that entire Boswash, that northeast corridor along 95 that's incredibly heavily populated. 50 million people live in this area. And, yes, hurricane-force gusts, at least, will be coming in tomorrow. So here's the latest on the storm. It's a Category 1, but the category really belies the impact of the storm. It's a tremendously large and powerful system. And here's a look at the wind, which will be around 30 to 50 miles per hour on the high end, gusting to that early in the morning. Then by 8 a.m., we start to see winds gusting to hurricane force in New York City and in Boston. Then by the middle of the day into the early afternoon, winds gusting to hurricane force there in the D.C. area and also down into Tidewater, Virginia. That is going to continue through the afternoon, and you want to pay attention to the direction of motion too. Initially, our winds are going to be coming out of the north, and they're going to switch around then out of the east later in the day across much of New England, while still coming out of the south here farther southward. And it's important to understand where the wind is coming from. For example, if you've got a big tree next to your house or your apartment, you want to be on the downwind side of your dwelling relative to that big tree, just to make sure that you're in the safest safest place. And then here's a look at the wind going into 2 o'clock. Even though it's beginning to start to come down, it's still going to be very strong across this entire corridor. And of course, that wind piling up the water. I want to quickly show you the New York City hurricane evacuation zones. You can check this out at nyc.gov to figure out if you are in Zone A. And let's go to Jim Cantore right now to talk more about that. And Jim, good thing that they have issued this evacuation order. It looks like we're really going to need it.
Yeah, I think so. You know, from everything we've looked at, certainly over the last couple of days, Carl, it's hard to find a hole in all this that says, oh, it would be okay not to. And so obviously we're very pleased to hear that the mayor has issued this earlier on. But, you know, other issues. Let me just show you around here. We're in that Zone A, by the way, which is the orange part of the map that Carl showed you. You've got, you know, trees with full canopy. So that's just all those leaves are going to do is just catch the wind and exacerbate the wind damage problem. It's not just here. I could have my cameraman Frank do a 360 and you can see those. The harbor is going to come up. I mean, no question about it here. The bay is going to rise over the top of the seawall. It will probably be in the grass area here where I'm staying. So you can see people out enjoying their Sunday as they typically would here at Battery Park City. They'd be taking pictures, talking to friends, sitting on a bench, grabbing a lunch, what have you. Those are the kind of things that people do. But tomorrow, obviously, everything will be on hold. And the big question is, when are they going to close down this park? So we're looking at maybe a 5 to 7 p.m. time frame on that. We're trying to be able to stay here till 7 p.m. tonight. And as you look at the timeline for New York, look at what happens as we get into Monday. I mean, you get a whole different animal. It's just going to be unleashed here. We're talking winds 60 miles per hour. We'll have heavy rain. We will have water rise. The water will start to rise. Then there's that high tide tomorrow night at 8:53 p.m., and that's what we expect, certainly the worst of that here. And that will be pretty close to the time that the center moves ashore. Either way, the water's going to pile up, and as long as those winds are on shore, they will not have a chance to get out. So a good move to evacuate to Zone A. That's about 375,000 people currently getting out of harm's way from Sandy. Stick around.
Hello and welcome back to the Weather Channel. We're so happy that you joined us because we're here to provide you the very, very latest on a huge, powerful storm. It's Hurricane Sandy out in the Atlantic.
And someone out in the field, that is Julie Martin, and she is in North Carolina. And you have been such a trooper enduring these very strong winds, Julie. But, you know, this is really not much compared to what the Northeast will see.
Yeah, it's just a little taste, Heather. Unfortunately, it's a pretty nasty taste, if you ask me. We were dealing with stinging rain here. We've got sand mixed in with it, and some very strong winds. We're dealing with tropical storm conditions here, and we've been dealing with them now since about midnight. So it is a long duration event. I want to take you out here to the Atlantic, and you can see we're at low tide. Tide is out, but by 6:30 this evening, all this water is going to be back in. The beaches have held up remarkably well in this stretch on Nags Head. In fact, the replenishment project they've invested so much money in has actually worked in this event and put a lot of that sand where it needs to be instead of inside of people's homes. However, you can see just how strong some of these winds have been. Some of the shingles there on the rooftop of the pier structure have blown apart, and in fact, that section of pier actually looks a little bit ragged as well, just to the left of that. So I'm thinking that that might have come apart as well as a result of these winds. We have also seen some coastal flooding here just about a half mile down the road. Also, Highway 12 is impassable. It's completely washed over. These winds are shifting now here along the Outer Banks, and we're seeing more of a northerly wind. Eventually, throughout the course of the day, they're going to be northwesterly, and so we're a little bit worried about flooding on the other side, which is the Pamlico Sound. So we're going to keep an eye on that for you as well, but just keep in mind this is a long event. It's not over, and everyone should probably stay inside, stay off the roads, and out of harm's way. Vivian?
No, that's what we can't stress enough, Julie Martin in Nags Head, North Carolina, is that this will be a long-duration event. In fact, the winds have already battered the coast of North Carolina, where Julie is, and that will continue for at least another 48 hours as the center of the storm moves northward. Deteriorating wind conditions expected along the New England coast and the coast here of New Jersey all the way to the Long Island Sound. This is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. We will be getting another within the next hour. At that time, it was a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane moving to the northeast at 14. So it is moving off in this direction right now away from the coast, but we're expecting expecting it to turn to the west and bring it back toward the coast as we go through the next 24 hours. And once it does that, it'll be making its way inland here and maybe making landfall somewhere near the New York City area. Right now, it's over 500 miles away from downtown New York City. It's over 300 miles away from the coast of North Carolina. But as we just saw with Julie, already we're getting some of the outer fringes and those rain bands and those gusty winds hitting up along the coast here of Virginia and in North Carolina, with winds sustained at 20 and 30 miles an hour and gusts even higher than that. So this is just the beginning. Again, the center of the storm is well out to sea, but it will be moving northward, and that means conditions deteriorating all across the Northeast. So here's a look at the overall impacts now of New York City, and let's go back to Heather because she has other cities in the Northeast and how they will be impacted as well.
Well, that's right, Vivian, because we are going to be monitoring New York, and we're going to be watching for the events to really start to go downhill as we go into tomorrow. So the timing that we are anticipating is, as far as those winds, we are looking at those winds to be gusting over 60 miles per hour. Now, this is checking into tomorrow. We are also going to find a significant water rise, and that rain is going to be very heavy at times. Take you into Monday night, wind gusts over 70, heavy rain. And then Tuesday, still those winds gusting to about 60 with that heavy rain coming in. But that's one of numerous areas we're watching. Also taking you into New Jersey along the coast. We are going to be finding coastal flooding, wind gusts here 50 to 60 miles per hour. This is Monday, and large damaging waves. Take you into Monday night, severe coastal flooding, those wind gusts up over 75 miles per hour potentially. And then also you can see those wind gusts up to 65 or greater as we go then into Tuesday. So as we note, Philadelphia, another place we're watching very closely. We have a flood watch in effect, winds gusting to 50 miles per hour on Monday. That rain is going to be very heavy, and we continue to find those strong winds and heavy rain as we move into Monday night.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of one of the most significant storms we've seen. What you're looking at there are the Zone A evacuation areas in New York City. There has been an evacuation order issued by Mayor Bloomberg, and if you'd like to find out exactly where you are relative to the zones, you can go to nyc.gov to get more information on that. And joining me now for the tropical update, our severe weather expert, Dr. Greg Forbes. And Dr. Greg, there's also going to be a significant rain component to this situation.
Yeah, and indeed there is. It'll be sort of a combination of Irene and Lee's rain with the possibility of some flooding. We're starting out a little bit like Irene with the heavy rain across eastern parts of North Carolina down into southeast Virginia. Some places there have already had over 3 inches of rain. But then it becomes more like Lee as the low pressure center of Sandra moves back into Pennsylvania. Now, a large reason for that is that it's a huge dip in the jet stream, a cold chord low that is coming in, and the winds ahead of that trough axis are from the south and east, so that is going to pull Sandy that way back into Pennsylvania. We call this a negatively tilted upper trough. Most of the time they have orientation from northeast to southwest. This one is northwest to southeast. Sandy gets picked up in that. Here is the Sandy then. There's also a frontal zone that has come east with that upper air system. It is stalling out, so a lot of the moist flow on the north side of Sandy going to hit into that. The squeezing and the collision there pushes the moisture up, gives heavy rain. It's already spreading up into the mid-Atlantic, and some of the moisture gets pushed then onto the cold side above the cold air, so that will spread into parts of the Appalachians as well. That's likely to be where the heaviest rain will fall, although east and southeast sides of some of the New England mountains also will get that. So here is the rain forecast, 2 to 4 inches in the green areas, some locally heavy flooding possibility there, but it's more like the Lee's main rain core there, 4 to 8 inches locally, a foot of rain. If you had flooding from Lee, I would expect to see that again. It's not quite starting as wet as some of the conditions back in 2011 in these areas, but still, with that kind of rainfall, it's going to be a big problem. Probably not as many thunderstorms, fortunately, involved in this as in Irene and Lee. That may hold down the rainfall rates a little bit, but still, you add up all that much water on hilly terrain, we're going to see river flooding and some flash flooding as well.
Could be very serious. So, Dr. Greg, I want to ask you, and I want to show you folks a satellite picture from the University of Wisconsin. It's high-resolution satellite imagery and rapid scan imagery. And Greg, as we look at the entire western Atlantic rotating here, have you ever seen anything like that?
No, it is a massively big storm going to affect all the way basically from the mid-Atlantic up in all of New England, but it's got the hurricane embedded in it. Extremely low pressure. We haven't really seen nor'easters that have had this kind of a low pressure with it, so it is hard to get a good analog, if you will, a past example that we can use for contrasting Sandy with.
Yeah, and that's a really good measure of the amount of energy in this storm, and we are awaiting the new advisory. Should be out at any moment. Right now, as of 11 a.m., it's a 75-mile-per-hour storm, but really acting a lot different than many Category 1 hurricanes. So the pressure now down to 951 millibars, as Dr. Greg mentioned. This is a look at the area of strong winds tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So that tropical storm force wind coming in earnest from Boston down through Providence, into Hartford, New York, down through the Philly area, farther inland into places like Harrisburg and Reading, Baltimore, D.C., down through Richmond. Very strong wind coming in. Then hurricane force wind gusts will be moving in later in the day towards the afternoon, and certainly so in the evening, and then continuing to pull in through the evening, through the overnight hours. So the wind advisories, the high wind warnings that are in effect for this heavily populated corridor, 36 hours long in many cases, continues to be very windy into Tuesday morning, and then finally that wind begins to settle down by Wednesday morning. With all that wind piling up the water along the coast, we've got a surge forecast that is significant, 4 to 8 feet from Ocean City, Maryland, through the Jersey Shore, across Long Island, and then closer in here, Long Island Sound, 6 to 11 feet, and then also there, just south of New York City, Raritan Bay, we're talking about a significant potential for water level rise. Now look at this. This is the maximum water level rise, not now. Last year, during Irene, we saw a maximum water level rise of 2 feet in Ocean City. That's as high as it ever got with that massive storm coming up the coast. The center of this storm is now more than 400 miles away from Ocean City. That is the current water level rise. Already, we have surpassed the water level rise in Ocean City, well ahead of this storm. So that gives you an idea of how much water is being pushed up and against this shore and will continue to be through the course of the next couple of days. So this could be very, very bad indeed. Guys, back to you.
Thank you so much, Carl. We appreciate it, and that's certainly not what we want to see, but you have to go with what Mother Nature does.
Absolutely. We don't make the weather, but certainly we're here to keep you ahead of this storm, and I'm telling you, this is a big one, so please keep it here to the Weather Channel for the very latest. Breaking weather news right now, the very latest advisory on Hurricane Sandy, just in from the National Hurricane Center. Expert analysis from our hurricane specialist, Dr. Greg Postel, is just moments away.
And you should be using this time now to prepare for Sandy's arrival in the Northeast. And from the words of our experts, this is your last day to do so. We are talking about a storm that will be a historical storm in terms of its size, in terms of the effects it's going to have, and the duration of this system. And again, think about flashlights, think about batteries, also food that you don't need a can opener. Some areas, Vivian, as you've heard, potentially without power for several days.
Yeah, everything you need to know to stay safe is found right here on the Weather Channel. Thank you so very much for joining us. Welcome to the special version of Weekend Now, Tracking Sandy. I'm Vivian Brown.
And I'm Heather Tash, and the Weather Channel is around the clock to keep you ahead of this storm. That includes all of us here, of course, at the Weather Channel headquarters in Atlanta, but also we have teams that are spread out throughout the field, and we're also bringing you a lot of various experts in different areas, too, that we are talking to share their information.
Yeah, from the Mid-Atlantic into the New England coast, our teams are fanned along the coast. Julie Martin is in Nags Head, North Carolina, and we'll check in with her in just a moment. But first, we want to get you the very latest.
And here it is. You know, we continue to hear the latest evacuation orders coming in. In New York City, for example, Zone A, that's the zone that needs to be evacuated right now. That includes about, by the way, 375,000 people.
Yeah, the lower Manhattan area definitely included in that Zone A. Officials will shut down the entire New York mass transit system at 7 tonight. In addition to that, New York City public schools are closed tomorrow.
Also, according to flight tracking company FlightAware.com, more than than 3,200 flights have been canceled ahead of Sandy. You can bet a lot more will be too. Amtrak also canceling some services. And we're also noting too that there are other areas besides just New York City that are asking people to evacuate.
Yeah, we are looking at this whole expanded area now. Everywhere you see the red in particular, but even the orange areas, we're talking about taking action right now as Sandy is moving to the northeast. That means it's moving closer to the northeast coast, and by this time tomorrow, it very well could be impacting you and right on your front doorstep.
And for an in-depth analysis that you will only get here on the Weather Channel, we're going to bring in our hurricane specialist, Dr. Greg Postel, who's been working seemingly around the clock. And, you know, this, Greg, is certainly going to be one that is probably going to achieve, unfortunately, most of our expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, following the forecast fairly well, which the forecasts early on were for some spectacular event, and that's what appears to be unfolding. Right now on the Carolina coast, can't forget about what's going on there right now. They're continuing to be battered by strong winds and heavy rains out there, not very far from where Julie Martin is on Nags Head. These rains have been continuing with wind gusts generally in the 30 to 40 miles per hour. So let's look at some of the observations down in that area where she is. We have right now in Virginia Beach, north wind sustained already at 28 miles per hour, gust of 42. Cape Hatteras sustained at 18, gust of 36. These winds are out of the north. They will likely be out of the north through the entire duration. Keep in mind the center of circulation is about 350 miles offshore east of Wilmington, North Carolina. So we're getting already strong winds well out ahead, hundreds of miles away from where the center is. And up closer to New York City, we're seeing sustained winds about 10 to 15 miles an hour, but gusts in the 10 to 20 miles per hour range. And we're already seeing water rises along this area of 2.5 feet near Sandy Hook, Kings Point, 1.5 feet. Already hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the center. That's only going to rise for the next couple of days. So let's look at the model, and we'll show you what will happen in some of the impacts, in particular along the coastal Carolina. This afternoon, the center of Sandy's right about here, and they're getting a lot of heavy rain and gusty winds along the coast here. And their worst conditions will likely be early tonight, we think, where the sustained winds will generally be in the 30 to 45 mile per hour range with gusts to about 60. That's about perhaps 11 o'clock tonight. And then from there on, Sandy will continue its northward movement and away from the coastal Carolinas. So we think perhaps late tonight conditions will relax a little bit, perhaps slightly improve later on tonight in the Outer Banks. But they will continue with that north wind throughout the duration, maybe perhaps of a northwest direction as well. And just a little further up the coast, for example, in Norfolk, Virginia, we expect their conditions to be worse, perhaps a few hours later than they might be on the Outer Banks. Maybe later on tonight after midnight with sustained winds 40 to 50 with gusts to 65. So with that weather going on in Cape Hatteras and the Outer Banks and in Nags Head, let's toss it now to Julie Martin for the latest.
Well, thanks, Greg. You're absolutely right. You know, we have been getting just battered by tropical storm force winds now for some time. In fact, since about midnight, we have been experiencing this, as have the people here along the Outer Banks. That, along with those north winds now, which are bringing just blinding, stinging rain in this direction. And you can see a better image of that here. You see the sand just scooting along the Atlantic here. We're still waiting for high tide, which will be about 6:30 this evening. The pier you see behind me still standing pretty well. We've seen a little part of it that looks to be coming apart kind of in the middle, and then some of those shingles on the top of that restaurant also blowing off. We have also seen some coastal flooding about a half mile down the road. Also, Highway 12 leading to Cape Hatteras is completely impassable as a result of overflow from the ocean. So certainly some impacts here, but not anything compared to what millions of people are going to be seeing in the days to come. In fact, Sandy, the center of Sandy, is expected to pass by Cape Hatteras, nowhere near it, but by it, around 2 o'clock this morning before making that left-hand jog. And keep in mind, all of these conditions that we have been experiencing in this long duration, this storm is nowhere even near shore. So in the Northeast, the storm is actually going to be coming ashore. So if you're watching this now and you live in the Northeast and you think this isn't too bad, trust me, it's going to be worse for you. So I hope that everyone is kind of getting a little taste of this. We certainly are, Vivian and Heather, more than a taste of it. And maybe just if you haven't prepared yet, maybe this will encourage you to do so.
All right, thank you so much, Julie. And, you know, when you look at the setup, too, you wouldn't expect it to turn inland because it's not something we would see in October, but it's just the timing is perfect for all of it to come together.
That's why we're here with our experts to keep you ahead of this storm.
And some of this video here just into our satellite center with people out preparing for the storm. You can see those shelves. They are virtually empty, and that is a problem when you wait too long in a situation like this. A lot of the supplies probably are already out of stock, and what we're looking at here is supplies in Point Pleasant, New Jersey. Vivian, kind of hard to grab that bread and milk, so to say, when everything is gone through here, but hopefully people do get the supplies they need.
All right, and we have been watching the area very closely. Right. We have mandatory evacuations now in Zone A, which includes the lower Manhattan area.
The storm is still coming, as you heard, and now it is time to take action. You know, a situation like this, you don't want to be overly panicked and overly prepared, but you want to be prudent. You want to do what's necessary.
And here's a look now at New York City. Of course, we just heard from the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo there. And again, he wants everyone to get ready and to know that we are not hyping the storm, okay? We don't do that here at the Weather Channel because we want you to be alert and aware. When we say that it's a big storm, we want you to know that it's big. So that's why we do not hype it. Right now, we have winds out of the northeast in the New York City area, and the storm itself is over 500 miles away, and already we're getting those northeast winds, and they're gusting at times over 20 and 30 miles an hour. They're sustained up to 20 miles an hour again right now, and the storm is well away from the New York City area. In fact, it's almost parallel to the coast of North Carolina, or, you know, parallel to it, but it's still even a good 300 miles away from the coast. Already, though, we're getting some of the heavier rain bands and the gusty winds feeding up against the coast of North Carolina. Our very own Julie Martin is there in Nags Head, and she's been reporting all afternoon on the gusty winds and the deteriorating conditions that she's facing. And the system is well away and is going to stay off the coast of North Carolina, but it's going to move inland to the New York City area. So this is what we're anticipating now. Again, all of the forecasts have already come to fruition to this point, so we have no reason to believe that the system is just going to all of a sudden collapse. It won't. So we want you to be prepared right now. In fact, by this time tomorrow, those winds in New York City could be gusting up to 60 and 70 miles an hour. That could create a lot of damage. So we want you to be prepared just in case you have to be without electricity now for at least 3 to 7, maybe even up to 10 days. This system also has a cold side to it, and Heather has more details on that.
That's right, Vivian. And, you know, we want to take you, too, into New York City because here's a place that we are going to see these winds continuing to pick up and really could be quite damaging. Let's take it over now to an area where Jim Cantore is that will be ultimately evacuated.
And a good Sunday, everybody, from Battery Park City here in New York, where people are actually outside today because they know they're going to be cooped up for quite a few hours. So we've had many people run by us here today. We still see boat traffic out there here in the Bay. Not surprising, the Statue of Liberty as well. But by time tonight rolls around at 7 o'clock, as we heard from the governor, things are going to shut down. Mass transit shuts down tonight. And, of course, then the mayor comes on and says we're going to evacuate Zone A. That is currently going on now. We talked about the tree damage potential, even here in New York City. I mean, look at these trees. You've got full leaf canopy out right now with these, and it's not just a couple of trees. There's a lot of trees here at Battery Park. So, you know, we can kind of spin around. Here's one in fall color here, a couple more that haven't quite turned yet. But this is Zone A, by the way. All those buildings back there represent people that have to evacuate and move inland because we expect water to potentially come into the streets here. They have made a decision not to close Wall Street tomorrow. The New York Stock Exchange is going to be open, but obviously it may be troublesome, especially later in the day when we get to that high tide at about 8:53. Here's a timeline for New York City. Tomorrow, it's a whole different animal. We've got heavy rain bands. We've got winds gusting. We've got water starting to rise. And certainly, again, we'll focus and keep an eye on that time of high tide. There's already higher tides because of the astronomical high tide that peaks during the day on Monday. Monday night, expect the worst of the wind all right, especially early on, and then we'll start to tail it off as we go into Tuesday, but not all that much. We will still see gusts to 60 miles an hour along with heavy rain squalls and gusty winds. So this is a long duration event. It's going to keep a lot of people in the city certainly inside as we would want them to be. That is the safest place to be in a storm like this, because some of these winds through these buildings with a 70-mile-per-hour wind could easily get as high as 90. Hunker down and ride out this one. Reporting from back.
Just getting out of the way of the hurricane, getting out of harm's way.
We are sandbagging. We're going to board up tomorrow morning.
We brought in our furniture, our outdoor furniture. We're going to get tarps and sandbags and put them against the house.
We are bagging all kinds of different goodies.
We're not sure if it's going to happen or not, so better safe than sorry.
And a lot of people hopefully will be safe rather than sorry as they prep. And here's some eyewitness pictures of folks doing just that. Folks are boarding up and they are moving out in some cases. By the way, taping your windows doesn't do any good. You have to use boards. And a lot of people said they learned their lesson from Irene because a lot of homes at that time were very badly damaged. Again, you can see some of what folks are sending in terms of the effects. Obviously, right now, looking good here, but that is all going to change. And look at all the leaves, too, on the trees. And that is not going to help the situation. You're going to lose a lot of trees, unfortunately.
Oh, and those trees will fall on power lines in the city, and that could leave us without power. In fact, millions could lose power over the next several days, and utility companies are already bringing in emergency resources to help in the aftermath.
That's right, and joining us right now on the phone is Carl Nedmin of Dominion Virginia Power. And oh, I'm sorry, this is going to be Alan Bloomberg that we are talking to. And just fill us in on some of the latest messages that you are sending out.
We are really looking into this storm surge, and we believe it to be the worst that we're going to see in our 80 years of measurements.
80 years of measurements. So how much worse do you think it's going to be than some of the worst conditions that you've seen in the past?
Well, I would say that the amount of water coming into the harbor, New York Harbor, for example, would be 4 to 8 feet higher than the usual tide. So if the tide is high tide, you'll get another 3 feet, and if it's a low tide, you'll get less than that. Hurricane Irene, which came through, was about 4.5 feet plus the tide. So you can see that this could be double Irene.
And for those people that don't live there right along the coast, or they might live in the interior U.S., but they're curious, explain what that can do then.
Well, what I imagine happening is that the path system and subways will likely be flooded, at least a 50% chance of that. So if people are trying to commute to work, they're going to have difficulty. If there's infrastructure, let's say power grids that are low-lying, the salt water can come in and really close those down as well. So I would expect power outages to occur as a result of all these storm surges.
Well, the mayor has mandated evacuations for many areas, including the lower Manhattan area. So do you think that was a good call?
Absolutely. And I think we need to watch the New Jersey side of that area as well. Lower parts of Hoboken, New Jersey, Jersey City, they're also very susceptible to all this water coming into New York Harbor.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the time you're taking to spend with us. And, you know, you mentioned New Jersey. We're going to go now to New Jersey. Governor Chris Christie is once again informing the folks in that state what he would like.
That are at odds with the technical report. I just think it made more sense to do it. It's my call. It's my judgment call. I made it. We'll see what happens. No, because, you know, when I went to bed last night, they told me the Raritan River Basin wouldn't be affected. I came in this morning, they told me the Raritan River Basin was the one greatest at risk. So no, you know, at least that kind of calculation just is not something I have time for right now. Fact is, I'm trying to deal with making sure we have everything in place we need to take care of people and keep them safe. Counting the numbers is something we can do later on. My job is to try to get everything in place we need to get in place to keep people safe. So how many people may be affected? count the number of people in the Raritan River Basin, you know, and that could change by 6 o'clock tonight. They could tell me something else could be greater affected depending upon where landfall is. So that's going to be very variable until the closer we get, the better they get in terms of telling us where it's going to come in. But there's always some variation to that. Other questions for the press, Michael? This conference call with Governor McDonnell, Governor O'Malley, Governor Markell, myself, Governor Corbett, Governor Cuomo, Governor Malloy, and Governor Patrick. There are a few mayors on there too, although they were harder to hear. But all those governors were on.
Governor, I know a lot will change. I know it's 9 days away, and we don't know what's going to happen yet. What about, has there been any contingency plans put in place yet for communities that might not be able to go to one of the school board elections or the general election because of the hurricane?
Well, you know, yes, all the secretaries of state of those states I just mentioned have all had a conference call yesterday, including the lieutenant governor, to talk about contingency plans.
Welcome back as we continue to follow Hurricane Sandy, and we just heard from Governor Chris Christie in New Jersey. New Jersey taking a lot of steps to help folks prepare for this.
Oh, absolutely. The Governor, Chris Christie, is urging his constituents to do what they need to do because right now he's beginning to issue some evacuations for the area because of this impending huge storm. And our very own Dave Malkoff has more information from what Governor Chris Christie said, and he was pretty adamant, huh, Dave?
Yeah, he says that this is definitely going to come on shore in his state. He doesn't know exactly where, but he is pretty sure that will come on shore at some time in New Jersey. As Hurricane Sandy continues to barrel towards the northeast coastline, we can't emphasize this enough. It is time to take action right now. The officials across the region are activating their emergency plans to make sure that everyone remains safe. Let's get the very latest information from New Jersey. The governor's office announced a gradual system-wide shutdown of all rail service and bus service. That will start in just about an hour and a half at 4 p.m. There is also a suspension of transit service that will require a minimum of 12 hours to complete. Now, all New Jersey state offices are now closed on Monday. We want to roll back some of that tape from Governor Chris Christie. You just heard him live, but he is talking about all these storms that have come onshore in New Jersey since he took office a few years ago, about 3 years ago. He says that these storms come over and over again every single year, it seems, but he doesn't want people to become complacent. Take a listen.
We have to take this seriously. And I know all of us, especially folks in this area, are veterans of a lot of these events. And sometimes that leads you to complacency. I would hope it does not in this instance. We need to prepare for the worst here. If it turns out that it's not as bad, that'll be a happy event for all of us. But I don't want to see lives lost unnecessarily.
Now, he also mentioned about 4,000 people are stuck on the Jersey Shore right now. They don't have a way of getting out for themselves, so they are bringing in buses to get those 4,000 people out of Atlantic City, and that should happen within the next few hours. There's also an evacuation. If you're in an evacuation zone, you want to know how to get your pets out as well. The ASPCA has put out some information about how to do that. If you go to my Twitter feed, @Malkoff, we'll show you exactly step by step how to get your pets into a shelter as well. Back to you guys.
All right, thanks very much, Dave. Folks in the Northeast trying to get away, at least from the coastline, and move farther inland away from Sandy.
And if they are staying put, then they need to have the supplies for potentially going without power for several days. We're going to bring in now one of our hurricane specialists, Dr. Greg Postel. And Greg, you know, we look here at this storm system, and the reason people need to prepare is this is unlike anything else historically that we have seen in this area at this time of the year.
Yeah, it's got a combination of a lot of ingredients that we haven't seen come together in the way that they are right now. We have the tropical pedigree also with some mid-latitude strong jet stream energy coming into it to all play a role to produce a significant outcome that many of us have never seen before. So let's look at the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center. As of 2 o'clock, a 75-mile-per-hour storm moving northeast at 14. That's paralleling the Carolina coast. It's right now about 550 miles south-southeast of New York City, but already even that far away, we're starting to see winds along the northeast coast in the 10 to 20 mile per hour range with gusts in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range with significant waves offshore here at 13 feet. So look at some of these water rises that we've already seen with these conditions in some of these locations. Kings Point, 1.5 feet. This is including the storm component and the tide. This is the total water rise. 2.4 feet at Sandy Hook, 1.9 feet at Battery. So here's the forecast now. This is one of the latest forecasts from the USGFS model. This is the forecast for Monday, 1 a.m. It will be parallel or offshore by about 250 miles of Cape Hatteras, but then it is going to be moving toward the northwest. Now, this is the turn that we've all been expecting now for a long time. Landfall likely someplace in central New Jersey, but again, effects spread out over a very large area with strong winds, hundreds of miles from the center. And in fact, Washington, D.C., we expect your conditions to be at their worst, very likely Monday evening and Monday night and early Tuesday morning. And here are the impacts outlined for Washington, D.C. We have heavy rain and wind gusts of 50 miles an hour during the day tomorrow, but then Monday night, watch what happens. We have gusts of 60 miles per hour in the forecast. These are likely out of the northwest direction. Then on Tuesday, the winds there shift around to the west-southwest, and the winds slowly decrease, but the rain will still be with them, heavy at times. With that, we'll send it to Julie Martin in Nags Head, North Carolina.
Well, thanks, Greg. I am getting a little protection from the wind here from the home off to my right, but still those winds are coming from the north. They're going to remain northerly over the next several hours. In fact, and we have been seeing tropical storm gusts, wind gusts upwards of 50 miles an hour since about midnight, so that is going to remain the same as well. Sandy, as you mentioned, is still well offshore, but the impacts have been felt here now for hours and hours. Even started feeling them yesterday, so this is just a little bit left of what we can expect for the rest of the evening. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on down shore. Now, this pier is doing just fine. This is the Nags Head Fishing Pier, and it's fine right now. We've seen some shingles come off the roof there. About a half mile beyond that, though, we have seen some water coming up from the Atlantic and over a roadway there. And if you keep going toward Cape Hatteras along Highway 12, we understand the Frisco Pier, which is an old pier as well that was already having some issues and was damaged, is also coming apart. We have seen a picture of that. We haven't been able to get to it because Highway 12 is impassable thanks to overwash from Sandy. I want to take you in now to Curry, North Carolina as well. Now that is well to my south, and this is some eyewitness video we have coming in and some very strong waves coming ashore there. We have heard reports of about 2,500 power outages in eastern North Carolina, and we're continuing to follow that. We've actually lost power here once so far today. But really what we're going to be dealing with here for the rest of tonight is those tropical storm force winds and deteriorating conditions. All right, a lot more on Sandy, where it's going next, and the impact on those millions and millions along the Northeast. Stay with us.
We are now following continued results here of Hurricane Sandy and the expected dramatic downturn for the Northeast. In fact, we want to take you into the New York City area, and they do have now evacuations for Zone A. And meteorologist and storm chaser Jim Cantore is in Battery Park.
And a good Sunday, everybody, from Battery Park City here in New York, where people are actually outside today because they know they're going to be cooped up for quite a few hours. So we've had many people run by us here today. We still see boat traffic out there here in the bay. Not surprising, the Statue of Liberty as well. But by time tonight rolls around at 7 o'clock, as we heard from the governor, things are going to shut down. Mass transit shuts down tonight. And, of course, then the mayor comes on and says we're going to evacuate Zone A. That is currently going on now. We talked about the tree damage potential, even here in New York City. I mean, look at these trees. You've got full leaf canopy out right now with these, and it's not just a couple of trees. There's a lot of trees here at Battery Park. So, you know, we can kind of spin around. Here's one in fall color here, a couple more that haven't quite turned yet. But this is Zone A, by the way. All those buildings back there represent people that have to evacuate and move inland because we expect water to potentially come into the streets here. They have made a decision not to close Wall Street tomorrow. The New York Stock Exchange is going to be open, but obviously it may be troublesome, especially later in the day when we get to that high tide at about 8:53. Here's a timeline for New York City. Tomorrow, it's a whole different animal. We've got heavy rain bands. We've got winds gusting. We've got water starting to rise. And certainly, again, we'll focus and keep an eye on that time of high tide. There's already higher tides because of the astronomical high tide that peaks during the day on Monday. Monday night, expect the worst of the wind. all right, especially early on, and then we will start to tail it off as we go into Tuesday, but not all that much. We will still see gusts to 60 miles an hour along with heavy rain squalls and gusty winds. So this is a long duration event. It's going to keep a lot of people in the city certainly inside as we would want them to be. That is the safest place to be in a storm like this, because some of these winds through these buildings with a 70-mile-per-hour wind could easily get as high as 90. Hunker down and ride out this one. Reporting from Battery Park City, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori.
All right, definitely needing to hunker down here all across the Northeast. This is the latest advisory now. The center of the storm right here, and it's a good ways away from the coast, over 300 miles away from the coast of North Carolina, but it is moving to the Northeast at 14, and we're thinking that even though it's moving to the Northeast right now, it's going to turn back to the west and make landfall here between overnight tomorrow night into Tuesday as it moves inland somewhere along the coast of New Jersey. We're thinking it's going to bring with it a widespread area of winds over 60 and 70 miles an hour expected now from Maine all the way down as far west as the eastern areas of Ohio, we're thinking, and locally heavy rain will be associated with this tropical system as well, because it'll bring with it all of its tropical moisture as well. We're talking about as much as a foot of rain here as we go through the next couple of days as Sandy gets closer and closer to the northeast coast. In fact, here's a look at some of the major threats now over the Northeast. Major flooding, wind damage could be widespread power outages too as a result of those strong winds. And also, you know, we'll be watching the coastal areas. Water levels will be higher than they've ever been from any other system in history, we're thinking. So this is a huge one. We want you to be ready. Heather?
All right, thank you so much, Vivian. And we also want you to be prepared, and you need to start, if you haven't, thinking about this immediately, because this storm is moving in, and tomorrow it will be too late. So as we look, we've got some weather-ready hurricane safety tips for you. First of all, keep your emergency supply kit within reach. Now, in that, you should have supplies of water, food. Typically we say 3 days. We're saying even more than that this time. Clothes, blankets, first aid kit. Also, do you have medications? You need supplies for your pets too, and a flashlight, batteries, radio. Listen for that latest information on your NOAA weather radio. Remember, this needs to be something with batteries or something that can hand crank to get that information if power goes out. And also, do not use candles. You want to only use flashlights when it comes to this type of a situation. And I really want to stress as well that not only do you need to do these various things, but really watch out for your pets too. You're going to need supplies for them, and you're going to need a plan in place for them too. Keep in mind that most shelters now do accept animals. All right, as far as the water that you need, 1 gallon per person per day. Remember, this could be a week for some of you. Food, non-perishables, make sure you have a can opener that is manual. You don't want to...
These folks need to get out of the barrier islands, and I know there will always be people, and I know these folks, I've spoken to these folks who are always smarter, and because the damage in Irene was less to the barrier islands, they're saying to themselves, well, maybe, yeah, see, he was wrong the last time. I turned out to be right, you turned out to be dead. That's not a great equation. And so, you know, the margin for error for me being wrong and you going and staying at a friend's house for 2 days, I think is significantly better than winding up with a severe injury or death for yourself or for your family.
And again, those are the words of Governor Chris Christie out of New Jersey. And again, concerned that people on the barrier islands may not pay enough attention to the seriousness of this. Let's bring in now our hurricane specialist, and that's Dr. Greg Postel. And I think that is the concern that all of us have here, is that people have lived through one type of storm or another, and they think this will just be like those.
Yeah, it won't. Right, and that's exactly the way. It's just not going to be that way. It hasn't behaved that way. It's not evolving that way, and it's not going to move the way that we typically see these things go. And let's look at the satellite image, and I'll try to explain what's going on to sort of show you how this is so different from many of the systems we've seen before. Here's where the center of circulation of Hurricane Sandy is, right here. It's about 550 miles south-southeast of New York City. But also notice there is an area of significant enhanced cloud cover cover right in here in the satellite imagery, there's a lot of heavy rain and significant weather that is on the coast of Carolina, even all the way up to New Jersey. And if we look at another satellite view to show you exactly what I'm talking about, this is an animation from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and this is a almost 1 minute imagery here showing you the sort of this high resolution motion and cloud features were associated with Sandy. Just for reference, right in here, this is where the Carolina coast is, and this is where the center of Hurricane Sandy is right here. This is the hurricane part of the storm. There's a collection of thunderstorms somewhat organized around that center that's spiraling very tightly around the center, but there's also an area right here of high clouds here. This is an area of disturbed weather that is associated with a lot of rising motion that's not directly tied to that middle part of Sandy, and we're going to bring in Dr. Forbes to talk a lot about that and why we're seeing such significant weather so far removed from where the center is.
Yeah, indeed, Greg, and that is where we're beginning to have Sandy interact with an upper air disturbance that has come across the country, and it's cold core. So let's take a look. And we have a lot of rain that is already setting up. It's showing its hand in many ways from eastern North Carolina, southeast parts of Virginia, all the way up now toward the Philadelphia area, and that's likely to continue. There's also some heavy precipitation back with that upper air system. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about. The jet stream comes a big meander. It comes south across the Central Plains down into Florida and then turns back northeast and then back northwest. When it takes on this northwest to southeast orientation, we call it negatively tilted. It's opposite. What we usually have is more from northeast to southwest. So when you get this negative tilt to it, there's a lot of upward motion that takes place out on this east side. There's a wind maximum up over the eastern Great Lakes that is also pulling air apart. So we've got a tremendous amount of rising motion. That's going to favor precipitation, heavy rain in that area. And this southeast winds aloft are going to pull Sandy back toward the northwest. We already have a stalled frontal zone that was on the east edge of this upper air system that is in that area. Sandy's moisture, as well as Sandy itself, is going to get pulled northwest along that. The east winds with the moisture in it will collide along that front, give heavy rain, and some of the moisture will be lifted up over the cooler air west of that for the heavy rain core. So it's a scenario for some very, very heavy rain, along with that widespread wind and storm surge that we've been talking about. So here in yellow, 4 to 8 inches, locally a foot or more, and with Sandy stalling out, if it continues to rain into Tuesday at heavy rates, we could see a lot more than that. 2 to 4 inches where we have winds on the east and south slopes of the mountains of New England. There could be some local flooding there, but it starts out a little bit like Irene's pattern where it's raining right now, but it transitions more to Lee's from last September. So many of the places that saw flooding from Lee last year could again see flooding this time. It's not quite starting so saturated. But, Greg, any place that gets more than 3 inches of rain with this kind of duration in these hilly areas, I'm expecting some major, maybe even some record flooding, and that is a big problem as well.
Yeah, and, you know, you were so eloquently describing, you know, this whole process, the interaction with that jet stream and Sandy. This is one of those situations where I haven't seen an extratropical or jet stream and a hurricane act cooperatively for so long. That's one of the unique things about it.
It's a massive system. The impacts all the way from New England probably into the Great Lakes states, at least with some strong wind gusts.
Okay, so we'll send it back to you guys.
All right, and again, just to reiterate, this is a storm of historical proportion.
Yes, the next 36 hours will be trying times for the northeast coast, so we want you to be prepared. I mean, the winds are already starting to pick up, but even more so, 50, 60, 70-mile-an-hour winds expected as we go through the next 36 hours as we leave you from the waves off of Rhode Island.
Hurricane Sandy already punishing the East Coast with heavy rain, vicious winds, and dangerous storm surge. Evacuations are underway. Hopefully, you have all the supplies you need because your window of opportunity is closing and closing fast. The Weather Channel has sent out a team of meteorologists to bring you the very latest on Sandy. Jim Cantori, Eric Fisher, Reynolds Wolf, and Julie Martin live on the scene reports coming up straight ahead. From the Weather Channel headquarters in Atlanta, you are watching an extended Weather Center live tracking Hurricane Sandy. We'll be with you all day and all night for the next several days. We are settling in just like you are. Thanks so much for staying with us here on the Weather Channel. I'm Todd Santos. Now, big news coming from New York City today as the mayor calls for the evacuation of what is called Zone A. That's some 375,000 people. Here's the very latest on this very, very large and dangerous hurricane. Right now, those massive evacuations are underway in several states across the eastern seaboard. New York City schools will actually be closed tomorrow. And New York City's mass transit system is also shutting down. I believe it's 7 p.m. this evening, and I think slowly after that the buses will follow suit. Sandy is packing 75-mile-per-hour winds and remains a Category 1 hurricane, but we're urging you to not focus just on that and to look a lot more at the size of the storm. We're going to explain exactly what that means. Take a look at the Weather Channel's exclusive Tropical Threat Index. Notice the huge area in red where we expect you all to be taking action. That includes a good stretch of even western New York, central to western Pennsylvania, West Virginia even, and northern Virginia. Again, make sure you have the ability to, again, weather a long period of time without power. You want to make sure that you have water, especially if you live in a home that has well pumps, something that uses power, that sort of thing. So kind of take all these things into consideration. I want to bring in our hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross. Brian, it's really, you can't understate exactly how prepared folks need to be.
They need to be ready to be home for an extended period of time, Todd. You're absolutely right. And it may be tough now to get more supplies. We've heard a lot of stories about stores already being bought out. But do what you can to be ready to stay home and not go out for a number of days, probably for the rest of next week if you're in the Northeast or the storm area. All right, let's go ahead and bring you up to date here. And the most important number on the stats is this pressure number here. It's 951 millibars, which represents the energy in the storm. As Todd said, spread out over an incredible distance, over 800 miles across this circulation. We've really never seen a storm of this size affecting the U.S. coast. So we're going to watch that number. Unfortunately, it's forecast to go down. That means the energy in the ocean, which is going to push the water ashore. So here is the wind forecast now. We have winds, tropical storm force winds already affecting Cape Hatteras. That's where Julie Martin is. We'll go to her in just a moment. And the circulation like this around the hurricane. Now watch, this is this evening. Now watch as we go forward in time, and you see by noontime tomorrow, those winds have overspread all of the big cities of the Northeast, from the Carolinas all the way up to New England, and it's only going to get windier through the day. So you should not plan to be out and around by tomorrow, because it's just going to get worse and worse. And look at this, by 9 p.m. tomorrow, according to the National Hurricane Center forecast, plus or minus that time, these are the hurricane force gusts. So the yellow is the area where damage begins, where tree limbs come down, where it's dangerous to be outside. And then this is where you can get real serious problems. And then the water is going to get pushed up, of course. How long is it going to last? Tuesday morning, still under the strong winds. By Wednesday morning, it's drastically reduced, but still going to be quite breezy through the day on Monday. So here are the effects, talking about the New York, New Jersey, and southern New England areas. Now look at the winds coming in here. This is Monday evening, and what that means is the water is going to get pushed up against Long Island, the south shore of Long Island, in Long Island Sound, down toward New York City, and at the same time we have this wind spreading over inland. So we have wind alerts of every variety, high wind alerts, hurricane wind alerts, all across different parts of the Northeast, and flood alerts for the entire area to the west of the Boston metro area, but extending down to include the Washington area as well. Talking about specific water rise, look along the coast here, and I want you to focus on the north side of Long Island Sound with 6 to 11 feet of water, and also around New York City. All right, as we mentioned, the winds are already blowing in North Carolina on Cape Hatteras. Julie Martin has been there being battered, and I can see it's raining as well. Julie?
Yeah, it is relentless here along the Outer Banks. In fact, we've been seeing tropical storm gusts since about midnight, and there's just no letting up. They come and go, but right now I'm a little bit protected by the Murphy's home here. They have been kind enough to let us use their property. I want to take you out to the Atlantic, though, and show you what's going on. We are starting to see the tide make its way in. We're expecting the next high tide around 6:30 this evening. These beaches have held up quite well thanks to a multi-million-dollar renourishment project, but just down the road, we understand that we do have overwash along the roadways there, and then if we go all the way down to Cape Hatteras and then farther out to sea, we do know that Ocracoke Island is dealing with at least a foot to a foot and a half of Soundside flooding. Now, that is a very vulnerable barrier island, keep in mind, so the folks out there are quite used to dealing with weather, inclement weather, and most of them are stocked and ready to kind of ride this thing out. And that is the message from Dare County right now. It's really just going to have to work its way out of this region. We are dealing with a couple thousand power outages, intermittent, the coastal flooding, Highway 12 completely impassable. And aside from that, things appear to be okay. It's just going to be dealing with these tropical storm conditions, again, until Sandy really comes anywhere near here, because it's still a couple hundred miles away, its center at least. We're not expecting the center to really pass until about 2 o'clock this morning. After that is when it's going to take that left jog and potentially impact those millions of people. So this is just a little preview, if you will, and that's all it is, because the conditions, Todd, as you know, are probably going to be a whole lot worse in the Northeast.
Oh, absolutely, Julie. Thanks so much. And, you know, just to put us in perspective, what everybody's seeing there around Julie, that system, the center of it, over 280 miles away from her, and it's been that bad there already. So we urge you, today is the day to be prepared well in advance of any landfall times, especially from the Mid-Atlantic up into the Northeast. If you're not ready by tonight, it is going to be too late. Travel on Monday and Tuesday, not recommended. It's going to be very tough in many places. Stay with the Weather Channel. Our wall-to-wall coverage, Hurricane Sandy, continues next. Take a look at this dramatic video. Eyewitness weather reporter sending this one in. Big waves crashing onto the shore in Cure Beach, North Carolina. It's right down near Carolina Beach, southeastern North Carolina, just outside the Wilmington area. You can see that water coming up basically to the deck over there where they're shooting the video. And would love to see anything you see out there. Just be safe while you're shooting the video and pictures. Eyewitness at weather.com or weather.com/eyewitness. Easiest way to get that to us. Now, there's so much you want to talk about as far as Hurricane Sandy is concerned. There's the wind threat, the possibility of thousands of trees and power lines coming down. There's also the rain and flood threat, and of course, the storm surge potential. One area bracing for the storm right now is Narragansett, Rhode Island. That is where we find meteorologist Eric Fisher. We've already been seeing those tides coming up higher and higher. And Eric, you know, seeing at least some of those gusts in the upper 20 range already.
It's certainly a pretty gusty day out here. We know that's going to go up as we head out into time, especially during the day on Monday. That's going to be our go time in terms of the worst conditions here in southern Rhode Island. Todd, you talked about all those impacts, and I think that's what makes this particular storm so difficult to talk about and get that message across. There are so many things that we have to cover in that forecast. Here, I think number one is going to be the surge, and that's going to be the main concern. Number two is the winds, and number three is the heavy rain that's going to come in as we head throughout the course of the storm. If you look behind me, usually the day before the storm, you get the folks taking in the sights. The waves are up, and look at all the kiteboarders who have come out here. I mean, droves of them taking advantage of some big waves already that have been rolling their way in. Out ahead, Sandy's arrival here. Of course, they're out today. Don't think they're going to be out tomorrow. It is going to be a miserable day as we have temperatures that are very chilly, which makes this a different kind of a beast compared to a usual landfalling hurricane. And then you've got that surge that is going to be extremely dangerous. They've issued a mandatory evacuation for all the low-lying and flood-prone areas in Narragansett. There's a map online with the town where you can check out exactly where those districts are. And we're going to be talking about 3 to 6 feet. That's a significant surge. It's going to be worse than Irene, and it may be worse than Hurricane Bob back in 1991. So if you think back, a lot of folks lived here back in Bob. If you had water in your neighborhood, you may have it in there again, and you want to get out to a safe place. Surge is always one of our most deadly concerns when it comes to a landfalling system, and this one is so unique for a lot of people. So the high tide cycle that we're most going to be watching is one around midday tomorrow. Then there's one later in the evening. It's that later evening one where a lot of the water is going to be shoved up along the shoreline. Big wave action. That's probably going to be your highest one. But those high tide cycles are going to stay high all the way through Wednesday. It's a long duration event. Todd, that's what makes this another angle that makes this particular storm unique.
It's just incredible, Eric. I can't wait to check back in with you in just a bit there. Again, thanks so much out of Narragansett, Rhode Island. And want to send it out now to our hurricane specialist, Dr. Greg Postel. And Dr. Postel, you know, we're talking about the pressure with this system. I know a lot of people don't completely get the full grasp of that at home, but we're talking about something that's stronger than the perfect storm, stronger than the superstorm. How do you really relate that, just the amount of energy in the system?
Yeah, generally the lower pressure, the more energy or the stronger the winds are with the system. And this one will have incredibly low pressures, already does in fact right now, but that will bring a lot of wind and a lot of waves from the ocean onshore, and that is all related to how low the pressure is going to be with this, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Let's look at the latest graphic to show you where it is. The system right now, the center of Hurricane Sandy is about 550 miles south-southeast of New York City. It is now paralleling the coast, but will begin to turn toward the west, we think, later on tonight, and eventually eventually make a landfall, we think, most likely in the New Jersey coast. Now, here's the forecast for tomorrow morning. The center of Sandy will likely be probably about 300 miles east of Norfolk, Virginia. A lot of rain and winds increasing along the coast. But then here we go. This is where the center is likely to make landfall. It's looking more and more like somewhere in central New Jersey at a minimum pressure. Now, some of the latest models, this particular one, the USGFS model, has the minimum pressure at 947 millibars. Now, just for reference, in historical terms, it is a lot lower than many of these locations have ever recorded. For example, New York's all-time record low pressure is 961, Philly 962, Atlantic City 960, 966 in D.C. So this coming in, and you know what? It's actually lower now than some of the models have forecasted right now. I think we're sitting at around 952, 953. So, you know, with the continued development of this system, both from in terms of a tropical nature on a smaller area, and the fact that the jet stream is going to be continuing to be involved in this and intensify the system, there will likely be some pressures here that they've never seen before, and that is just a measure of how strong and how energetic this storm is on a big scale. So, you know, it's just something we've never seen before. So I'll send it back to you, Todd.
Dr. Purcell, thank you so much. And of course, that speaks to all of you who say been through Category 1 hurricanes before. History, again, that's a good historical perspective to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. Millions of you will be losing power during this storm. What you may need during that power, extended time without it, we'll talk. Welcome back. Coming up on 20 minutes past the hour, I want to take you live to Washington, D.C. right now. We do have temperatures, again, on the cool side of things, actually in the 50s, talking about some upper 50s, some winds there gusting, or should I say, yeah, out of the north at 9 miles per hour, gusting to 21, so feeling a little bit cooler out there. And for D.C., want to let all folks know, especially those of you who regularly deal with some of the flooding out on the roadways, we're easily going to be seeing some impacts there as far as the flood potential with big-time rainfall coming into the D.C. metro area, Baltimore as well nearby. That heavy rain getting certainly into there even early Monday morning. So really right now, want to make sure that you are fully prepared, batteries, the whole deal for the potential for these power outages. Winds even up to at least 40 miles per hour. Some of those gusts to 60 there Monday night into Tuesday, of course, as the system makes its run at the coastline. Currently, it's actually still moving off towards the northeast away from the coast. So setting the stage there to turn in towards the D.C. area, towards the mid-Atlantic in general. But these impacts we're already feeling along the coastline, even despite the distance the system currently is from the coast. Now, if you have been ordered to evacuate, and we have had some of those orders already put out there, it is important that you not only take the order seriously, also want to make sure that you take the right documents with you. Meteorologist Jen Carfagno has the full list.
One more piece of advice for people who have to evacuate because a hurricane is coming. Don't forget the documents like checkbook, safe deposit key, birth, death, and marriage certificates, will and power of attorney, Social Security card and records, military records, medical records, insurance policies, health insurance cards, retirement account records, recent pay stubs, tax returns, car titles and registrations, mortgage deeds or rental agreements, warranties and receipts, credit cards, passports, backup digital documents from computers, on disk or the more portable flash drives.
Ultimately, it really comes down to the individual and the amount of data that they need to store.
Plus, with a camera, record things you're leaving behind.
So if it really is bad and we have to make an insurance claim, you at least have some sort of record as to what was in your home.
If you rent, evacuate with everything because
50% of folks that rent don't have renter's insurance.
Tim Bowen, property claims agent with MetLife, says both owners and renters need to protect keepsakes.
Because as insurance folks, we can't go replace those images of your children when they were growing up.
I'm meteorologist Jen Carfagno for the Weather Channel.
Jen, some great advice. And also, just to let you know, a lot of the shelters now are also pet-friendly. You may also need some papers for your pets. Again, check into that if you are planning to evacuate. A lot of them already opening up right now. That's been a change over the years. They've been a lot more accommodating to pets. A quick look at least where we are right now as far as some of the winds, the waves that we're already seeing, especially some of these just off the mouth of, let's say, the Chesapeake Bay. The winds 38 miles per hour to the northeast, waves up to 15 feet there. Some of these other gusts actually into the 40s there, Virginia Beach, some of the 30s there down towards Hatteras. Again, this is what we've been talking about. Many areas in the Outer Banks have already been kind of getting battered, but as we slowly start to see that system make its way closer towards the coastline, especially into tomorrow and certainly into Tuesday, we're going to see these winds increasing. So this is just the beginning of a long long-duration event. Notice even all the way in towards Scranton, PA, Philly, some of those gusts already in the upper 20s. This system well over 500 miles off to your east and southeast. So again, this is why we're talking about being prepared now. Some of those waves, at least up towards Cape Cod Bay, also getting up into the at least double-digit range as far as some of the wave action right now on some of those buoys. So again, there's a look at it towards Provincetown, even gusting now into the upper 20-mile-per-hour range. There's a look at where the system is. So here I was just talking about, well, some of these areas well up to the north and east. Max sustained winds still holding at 75. And the piece that I've been talking about, too, is that the system is still moving northeast at 14 miles per hour. So it's getting ready to make that swing and that turn eventually back towards the north and northwest. Timing-wise, the reason we're telling you all to be certainly ready as we get into tomorrow is because we're already going to start to see some of the effects across these areas tonight, and even later today. We've already started to see the winds pick up towards southeastern New England. There's a look at the rain increasing, winds gusting to even 60-plus miles per hour through many of these areas. That does include Jersey Shore, Delaware Bay, back down through the mouth of Chesapeake, Norfolk, Virginia as well. There's a look at it onto Monday, and at this point, many people who have lived through hurricanes before, you know, you kind of deal with the peak of the hurricane for a few hours, maybe 3, maybe 6 hours in some cases. This over 24 hours. So this is why we're talking about being ready there. Gusts to 75 miles per hour on Monday. Coastal flood potential. We have a lot of high wind warnings, a lot of flood watches across a good stretch of that same area. And then the system just gets hung up here in the northeast. So even Tuesday, still some gusty conditions out there. Still the potential for 70-plus mile per hour gusts. And then, of course, we bring in the colder air that many of us have already started to feel, but it'll really start to interact when you're dealing with the snow potential on the backside. But we're quite a ways away from that. Quick look at least the official National Hurricane Center path. There's that track bringing in towards basically the mid-Atlantic, but we're still focusing more. I'm just using this to give you the idea of the timing, because the scope of this thing is so large, it really doesn't matter where within that red zone, at least along the coast, that this system actually moves onshore. And there's a look at it through Thursday. We'll still be dealing with some of that circulation. The winds extending well outside of the center. We'll talk more about that. Our continuing coverage coming up right after we check your local on the 8th. Welcome back, half past the hour. Right now, the rush is on. It is crunch time as people make their last-minute preparations for Hurricane Sandy. The storm is surpassing many expectations, and not in a good way. Really kind of living up to at least what we've been expecting out of the models here. Now, we'll show you where and when that storm will cause some of the flooding potential, the downed trees. Again, the power outages for millions of people expected from this system. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm Todd Santos, and you're watching our round-the-clock coverage of Hurricane Sandy, just settling in here for what will be a long system. Again, already a historic storm, and it's not even close to over yet. Let's show you where Hurricane Sandy is right now. There's a quick look at least some of the radar. Again, some of the radar returns with some of that rain already moving into portions of the coastline. We've already been dealing with this, especially through the Outer Banks. Again, it's some 280 miles off the coast there, off of Nags Head, North Carolina, some 500-plus miles off of New York City. The rain's already moving in. We're already seeing some gusty winds, and we've already started to see a little bit of a water rise across some of those areas, with the high tides going steadily higher each time they've been going higher. Again, or should I say, with each tide cycle, we've been seeing some of those numbers going higher. The very latest into our satellite center here at the Weather Channel, 52-mile-per-hour winds and heavy rain pounding Norfolk, Virginia right now. They're on the move in Manhattan. 375,000 New Yorkers are being evacuated from what's called Zone A there. They're putting on the brakes on mass transit there in the Big Apple as of 7 o'clock. The subway system's shutting down there. Bus service ending at 9, so make sure you are where you need to be before that time frame. And let's bring in our hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross. Brian, this system is nowhere even close to the peak of what we're expecting, but already substantial effects in the Mid-Atlantic.
Really substantial effects, and we have a multitude of effects as you normally get with a tropical system or a monstrous system, including storm surge beginning in a lot of places, but also rain. And I'm going to show you the radar in a second. To bring you up to date, if you're just tuning in, we still have a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane here. The pressure is spectacularly low, representing the energy in this system, and it's moving to the northeast at 14 miles per hour. Now, talking about the rain, look at this. Look at this band here. Here is the rain coming in from Sandy, the rotation around Sandy, and it's bumping up against another weather system here. Coming up in the tropical update, Dr. Forbes will be here, and we'll talk about this. But look out here near Salisbury and the Delmarva to the east of Washington, Baltimore. That rain has been sitting there, and that is a significant band, and that is going to spread north as well up toward the Delaware Valley and the Philadelphia area. So look out. Now, why are we confident that this is going to come into New Jersey? Look at the computer models, all focused on New Jersey now, and the significance of that is if the center comes in here and the winds are rotating that way, that means that the water gets piled against the coast all the way from the point where it comes in north all the way through New England. Now, so you have that problem at the coast. So this is the coastal threat zone there. Then you also have this huge wind event and wind system that's going to spread across the entire Northeast. So the center is only relevant at the coast. Otherwise, the wind and rain is going to affect the whole Northeast, with most of the rain on the other side, the left side of the system coming in. Again, Dr. Forbes and I will talk about that. All right, let's focus on this New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and up to Boston area and that coastal issue. Remember, the wind is coming in this way, piling up the water. So on the south shore of Long Island, on the Jersey shore, 4 to 8 foot storm surge. This is a Hurricane Irene type storm surge there, but more energy in the water, and so higher waves expected this time. But look up in here. Look at the purples here. That's Long Island Sound. There you have Raritan Bay and New York Bay up into New York Harbor. There we're showing 6 to 11 feet of storm surge. That's on top of the tide, which will be higher than normal because of the astronomical tides. And you see 3 to 5 feet, or even up into Cape Cod Sound up there. So a tremendous amount of water moving with this system. Now, at the water, at the lower end of Manhattan and Battery Park City, is Jim Cantore. Jim, can you see it yet? Can you see the water coming up at all there?
Not really, not noticeable. You know, we're going to get to high tide again tonight, but it's not, at least from my vantage point, coming up. It's just eerily calm out here, Brian. I want to read you a tweet that was issued from the National Weather Service in New York City. Here we go. Predicted water level of 11.7 feet at the Battery here in New York, which is where I'm standing. As of 8:13 p.m. on Monday, so tomorrow night at 8:13, that would break the record of 10.5 feet from 9/15/60. That was Hurricane Donna back in 1960. So we're expecting 11.7 feet of total water rise here. That would put me easily underwater. As a matter of fact, this whole Battery Park area, Frank has showed it, where people are out here just having a good time today, will be put underwater. Several streets here in Lower Manhattan will be underwater. Wall Street will have issues, obviously, with some of those areas underwater. So this is why it was just so important to get that evacuation order. This is exactly what we feared here for Zone A. And I'm telling you, we got to get people back out of the way and through here. No question about it. All right, let's talk about the preparations that continue to be underway in earnest here. A lot of these need to be wrapping up as we get into tonight, because tomorrow morning we know it's going to go downhill in a big hurry. We have people that are just basically buying whatever they can. I understand in parts of the upstate in New York that they are looking for generators. So I know folks are watching this from Ace Hardware, from Home Depot, from Lowe's. They need to be on standby with all this stuff and get it in here as soon as possible after the storm pulls away. It almost may be too late, obviously, to get large shipments like that in. So all sorts of things that are being put, if you will, on standby. Power trucks, poles that are just sitting, some coming as far away as the Gulf Coast and even the far Midwest, waiting to get in here and clean this up. Again, we got 900 miles of tropical storm winds, and embedded in that, a much larger area of hurricane winds, too, in and around the center. So just an amazing storm, Todd. Something I've never seen and witnessed or even covered, and it's going to be a long ride. Back to you.
Jim, thanks so much. And it doesn't seem like that long ago when we were watching you standing in knee-deep water out there, Battery City Park, with Irene, but this is likely to be so much worse than that. I appreciate the reports there from Lower Manhattan. And, you know, it's really important to remember, after the rain and the wind, millions of you will not have power. It'll be on the chilly side, too. So, again, it may even be snowing where you live, especially if you're up in through portions of the Appalachians. Here's what you want to make sure you have in your disaster kit. Make sure you have blankets, sleeping bags, things like that, as well as a multi-purpose tool. Welcome back. 3:40 Eastern Time here, 2:40 Central. Welcome back into our continuing coverage of Hurricane Sandy. Want to start you out in North Carolina. Julie Martin has been braving the wind and the rain for well over a solid day here in Nags Head on through the Outer Banks there. Julie, you know, this system really just kind of going right around you, seeing effects on all sides of it.
Yeah, you know, and plus we have water on both sides here in the Outer Banks. We have the Atlantic side here, and then we have the Sound side. So as these winds move around, we could see some flooding over on the Sound side as well. Right now we're still getting a north wind, which is probably going to be the case for some time. Todd, I want to point out the Atlantic, though. The tide is coming in, and you can see it is coming in quite far. In fact, that's about 70 feet of beach there on a normal day, and this is what we're dealing with right now. Fortunately, those winds are now from the north, so a lot of that that is just blowing down shore, and it's not coming directly toward the homes here. Also, this beach nourishment project they spent millions of dollars on has worked, and these homes are protected. So that is also some very good news. I want to take a look, though, at the timing of all of this here along the North Carolina coast. Basically, we're going to be dealing with tropical storm conditions throughout the day, the rest of the evening, and even some very windy conditions tomorrow. We'll see those winds 25 to 40, gusting to around 55. We've already seen that. We're going to continue to see that. Some coastal flooding possible, some surge as well. In fact, coastal flooding has already been a problem here along the Outer Banks throughout the day today. In fact, just a short distance down, we do know of 5 streets that have overwash. That overwash has gotten into the canal system here. Also, Highway 12 is the only way down to Cape Hatteras. That is completely impassable. That happened as of this morning, so no in or out as far as Cape Hatteras goes. Most of the residents here are very used to inclement weather, though. They've decided, a lot of them, to stay in place and just sort of batten down the hatches and ride this thing out. But it is pretty impressive nonetheless that Sandy is still a couple hundred miles offshore, and we're still getting tropical storm conditions and an Atlantic Ocean that looks like this right now. So kind of an eerie and ominous sight when you consider what is to come in the Northeast, Todd.
Yeah, it really is, Julie. All right, thank you so much. Really appreciate you braving the elements there out in eastern North Carolina. Again, want to take you now actually to the Jersey Shore, down towards Point Pleasant, New Jersey. That's where we find Mike Seidel out, at least kind of checking out what's going on there. Mike, I'm curious if folks have started boarding up there or if they've already taken some of those preparations, because this is a very serious storm for that area of the country.
It is. Unfortunately, we've got still hundreds of people in town on the boardwalk, on the beach, and a mandatory evacuation kicks in here in 20 minutes. We'll see how things change. A good rain shower, I found, will send people scurrying for their cars. Let's bring in Ron Morano of Jersey Central Power Light. This is the second biggest power provider in the state of New Jersey, and I know you guys are ramping up for what is likely to be worse than Irene and Snowtober.
Yes, Mike. We've brought in 13 additional line workers from out of state in addition to the 400 Jersey Central Power and Light line workers. We've got 1,200 forestry personnel, and we're also backing up all of our management and support roles.
And tell us a little bit about Irene and compare that with Snowtober, more of a tree issue, because this time obviously we're going to have a lot of trees coming down.
The difference between Irene and Snowtober was the leaves still being on the trees and the heavy wet snow. It just caused a tremendous amount of tree damage. We thought we'd seen it all in Irene, and then Snowtober hit.
And what's your sense? What's your gut tell you about this one?
Well, we're preparing for the worst. We've been listening to what all of the experts have been saying. We've been telling our customers they need to be prepared as well. We're prepared for the worst, and we said it could be 7 to 10 days before people have power back.
And, you know, it's one thing to get the wire back up. It's another thing to get all the trees cleared. How do you handle clearing up all the trees? Do you subcontract out?
We contract out. As I said, we have 1,200 forestry people on hand. We'll get more as needed. As areas clear up, they send more and we take them. Trees are a major problem, and many of the trees we have to clear are trees that are not in our right-of-way.
And the Emergency Operations Center, where's that set up?
We have an Emergency Operations Center operating in Morristown and Red Bank.
And that's 24/7, I assume.
Absolutely, 24/7.
Okay, Ron Morano with the Jersey Central Power and Light Company, providing power to 1.1 million customers here in Jersey.
That's correct. Thanks, Mike.
Well, I wonder how many of them will lose power. What's the over-under? You don't want to go there.
We can't predict, no.
Okay, I don't think it's going to be pretty.
No.
Okay, thanks for joining us. So there you go. Everybody's ramped up, all the power companies, crews coming in from numerous states. But again, Todd, with the estimation of 10 million customers losing power, it's going to be a while before some folks get the juice back on, and it's not exactly August anymore. Back to you.
It is certainly not. All right, Mike Seidel, Point Pleasant, New Jersey. Thank you so much for the update there. Up next, we'll have your full tropical update, including the very latest observations and a detailed look at when you may experience the worst of Hurricane Sandy. The system is nowhere close to its peak for many of our friends in Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and beyond. Our partners, Weather Underground, are saying this could be a 1 in 250-year rain event. Severe weather expert Dr. Greg Forbes standing by with details.